Greenland and Denmark historical journey, ice, Vikings, and the Arctic's future. 2 lands. 1 kingdom. Denmark, a small European nation of green fields and efficient cities. Greenland, the world's largest island, a vast Arctic wilderness of ice and rock. Separated by 2,000 miles of ocean, bound by 300 years of colonial history, and now at the center of a geopolitical storm. Trump's 2019 offer to buy Greenland. Chinese investment proposals, military bases, climate change impacts, rare earth minerals. Why does Greenland suddenly matter so much? Why do superpowers compete for influence over an island with just 56,000 people? Why is this relationship between Denmark and Greenland, master and colony, then partners, now perhaps approaching divorce, so crucial to understanding the Arctic's future? The answers lie in a remarkable history of Arctic survival. Viking exploration, colonial exploitation, Cold War strategy, and climate change that's transforming the Arctic faster than anywhere on Earth. This is the story of how Denmark and Greenland became intertwined, and why the world is watching as they decide their future. Our journey begins not in Denmark, but thousands of years ago, in the frozen north, where the first peoples learned to survive in Earth's harshest environment. Greenland's human story begins around 2500 BCE, when the first hunters crossed from Arctic Canada. These Paleo-Eskimo peoples, known as the Sakak culture, were hardy survivors adapted to extreme conditions. They lived in small, mobile groups, hunting seals, walrus, and caribou. They built temporary shelters, crafted sophisticated tools from stone and bone, and developed technologies that allowed humans to survive where no plants grew and darkness lasted months. The Sakak culture lasted 1,500 years before disappearing, likely due to climate changes. They were followed by the Dorset culture around 800 BCE, people who hunted whales without boats, walking on ice to harpoon them. They too vanished. Then, around 1200 CE, came the Thule people, ancestors of today's Inuit. They brought revolutionary technology. Thule had kayaks for hunting, umiat boats for transport, dog sleds for travel, and advanced weapons. They didn't just survive the Arctic, they mastered it. They hunted bowhead whales, developed complex social structures, and spread across the Arctic from Alaska to Greenland. These were Greenland's indigenous people, the Kalalit, as they call themselves. 800 years before Europeans arrived, they lived sustainably in this harsh land, developing deep knowledge of ice, weather, and animals that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. Their descendants live in Greenland today, carrying forward traditions while navigating a radically changing world. The Vikings arrive, Denmark's early history. While the Thule spread across the Arctic, across the Atlantic, another seafaring people were emerging, the Vikings. Medieval Denmark, settlements, farms, warriors. Denmark in the 8th century was a collection of tribal kingdoms in Scandinavia. The Danes were farmers, traders, and increasingly, raiders. From the 790s onward, Viking longships terrorized Europe's coasts. But Vikings were more than raiders. They were explorers, colonizers, and traders who transformed medieval Europe. And their most audacious exploration led to Greenland. 982 CE, Eric the Red. In 982, a violent Norwegian outlaw named Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for murder. Sailing west into unknown waters, he discovered a massive land of fjords and valleys. Despite being mostly ice, Eric named it Greenland, perhaps the first recorded real estate marketing scam. Eric returned to Iceland and convinced hundreds to colonize this green land. Around 985, they established 2 settlements, the eastern settlement and western settlement in Greenland's southwestern fjords. The Norse Greenlanders weren't just surviving, they were farming. They raised sheep and cattle, grew limited crops, and hunted walrus for ivory that they traded to Europe. At their peak, perhaps 5,000 Norse colonists lived in Greenland. But they were vulnerable. They depended on farming techniques from Iceland that barely worked in Greenland's harsher climate. They refused to adopt Inuit hunting methods, despite living beside them. They insisted on maintaining European livestock and lifestyles unsuited to the Arctic. During the 14th and 15th centuries, as the medieval warm period ended and the Little Ice Age began, the Norse Greenland colonies slowly collapsed. Farms failed. Ships from Europe stopped coming. By 1500, they were gone, vanished so completely that their fate remains mysterious. Did they starve? Sail back to Iceland? Die from disease? Were they absorbed by the Inuit? We still don't know. But Greenland's first European colonization ended in complete failure, a warning about Arctic survival that later colonizers would ignore. Danish kingdom and colonial Greenland. Denmark rises, from Vikings to kingdom. Medieval Denmark, emergence as a power. While the Norse Greenlanders died out, Denmark was transforming. In the 10th century, King Harald Bluetooth unified Danish tribes and converted to Christianity. The Viking age of raiding gave way to state-building. Denmark's medieval territories expanding. Medieval Denmark became a major European power. At its height, the Kalmar Union, 1397 to 1523, united Denmark, Norway, and Sweden under Danish kings, creating a Nordic empire dominating the Baltic. Denmark's golden age came under Christian IV, 1588 to 1648, who built Renaissance castles, modernized the military, and expanded Copenhagen. But the 30 Years' War devastated Denmark, and by the 17th century, Sweden had broken free and become Denmark's rival. Swedish wars, lost territories. Denmark lost repeatedly to Sweden, surrendering territories and influence. By 1700, Denmark was no longer a great power but a small kingdom holding Denmark proper, Norway, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and colonial outposts. Norway, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and colonial outposts. Colonial ambitions, ships sailing to distant lands. Like other European nations, Denmark sought colonial wealth. Danish colonies appeared in India, the Caribbean, West Africa, and crucially, Greenland was rediscovered. Recolonization of Greenland. In 1721, a Norwegian-Danish missionary named Hans Egede arrived in Greenland with a mission to Christianize any surviving Norse colonists and reclaim Greenland for Denmark-Norway. Egede found no Norse survivors. They'd been gone for centuries. Instead, he found the Inuit, whose ancestors had outlasted the Vikings through superior Arctic adaptation. Undeterred, Egede decided to convert them instead. Colonial mission, churches being built, trade posts established. Denmark established colonial trading posts along Greenland's west coast. The Royal Greenland Trading Company, essentially a state monopoly, controlled all trade. The model was simple and exploitative. Inuit hunters provided seal skins, whale products, and fox pelts. Denmark provided limited goods at inflated prices. Cultural destruction, traditional practices being suppressed. Danish colonization brought systematic cultural destruction. Inuit shamanic practices were banned. Children were forcibly taken to Denmark for education. Traditional names were replaced with Danish ones. The Kalaallisut language was suppressed in favor of Danish. Missionary schools, indigenous children being taught in Danish. Yet Denmark's colonization was less violent than many. There were no large-scale massacres. Inuit weren't enslaved or driven from their land, partly because Denmark wanted them as hunters and trappers, partly because Greenland's climate prevented agricultural settlement. Closed colony policy. In the 19th century, Denmark implemented a closed colony policy. Greenland was sealed off from outside contact to protect indigenous culture, while Denmark monopolized resources. In reality, this kept Greenlanders isolated, impoverished, and dependent. World Wars and transformation. The World War's impact. World War I, Denmark neutral, limited impact on Greenland. World War I barely touched Greenland. Denmark remained neutral. But the war's aftermath brought change. 1920s, Greenland dispute with Norway. Norway, newly independent from Sweden, claimed eastern Greenland based on Norwegian hunting and exploration. Denmark took the dispute to the International Court, which ruled in Denmark's favor in 1933. Denmark's sovereignty over all of Greenland was confirmed. April 9, 1940, Nazi invasion of Denmark. Then came World War II. On April 9, 1940, Nazi Germany invaded Denmark. The Danish government capitulated within hours. Overnight, Denmark lost its ability to govern Greenland. Greenland alone, American flags appearing. Greenland's governor, Esbjørn, made a fateful decision. He would govern independently with American support rather than submit to Nazi control through Denmark. U.S. military bases, construction, troops arriving. The United States, not yet in the war but alarmed by German expansion, needed Greenland's strategic position for air bases and weather stations. In 1941, the U.S. established bases, bringing thousands of troops. Transformation, money flowing in, modernization beginning. For Greenlanders, American presence brought unprecedented contact with the outside world, money, jobs, and glimpses of modernity. The closed colony policy was shattered. Greenland had tasted independence and wouldn't forget. Cold War and decolonization. Post-war, 1945–1950s. After the war, Denmark resumed control, but everything had changed. Greenland had proven strategically vital. The Cold War was beginning, and Greenland was positioned between the United States and Soviet Union. 1951, Thule Air Base, Kont. In 1951, Denmark secretly agreed to expand U.S. military presence. Thule Air Base was built, a massive installation that would become crucial to American nuclear strategy and early warning systems. Thule Inuit community, forced relocation. But building the base required removing the indigenous community living there. In 1953, the Danish government forcibly relocated 116 Inuit from their ancestral homeland to settlements 100 miles north. They were given 4 days' notice. Abandoned homes, Inuit forced from traditional lands. This betrayal would haunt Danish-Greenlandic relations for decades. The Thule Inuit fought for compensation and the right to return. It wasn't until 1999 that Denmark formally apologized and paid compensation. But the injustice was never fully remedied. 1953, constitutional change. Meanwhile, decolonization was sweeping the world. In 1953, Denmark formally ended Greenland's colonial status. Greenland became an integral part of Denmark, no longer a colony but a county, with representation in the Danish parliament. Modernization campaign, G50 and G60 programs. Denmark launched ambitious modernization programs. Traditional settlements were closed. People were relocated to larger towns. Modern housing, schools, and hospitals were built. Greenlanders were encouraged to abandon hunting for wage labor. Cultural destruction, lost traditions, social problems emerging. The intentions may have been good, but the results were devastating. Traditional knowledge was lost. Communities were disrupted. Social problems, alcoholism, suicide, abuse, exploded. Denmark was imposing Danish solutions on Greenlandic problems without consulting Greenlanders. Growing resentment, protests, political movements. By the 1970s, a new generation of educated Greenlanders demanded more. They wanted self-governance. They wanted control over resources. They wanted to be Greenlandic, not pseudo-Danish. Home rule to near independence. Home rule and self-government. 1979, Home rule granted. In 1979, after a referendum where 70% of Greenlanders voted yes, Denmark granted home rule. Greenland gained its own parliament, the Inatsisartut, and control over most domestic affairs. Greenlandic flag, red and white, representing ice and sun. Greenland adopted its own flag, developed Greenlandic language education, and began asserting cultural identity. It was a new beginning. Economic reality, still dependent on Danish subsidies. But economic reality was harsh. Greenland's economy depended on fishing, primarily shrimp and halibut, and massive annual subsidies from Denmark, about 3.4 billion kroner, approximately $500 million, roughly half of Greenland's budget. 2009, Self-Government Act. In 2009, Greenlanders voted for expanded self-government. The Self-Government Act gave Greenland control over justice, policing, and natural resources. Crucially, it established a path to full independence. The Independence Clause. The Act states that Greenland can become independent if it chooses. Denmark cannot prevent it. But independence means losing Danish subsidies. Greenland must become economically self-sufficient first. The resource question. Geological surveys. Massive mineral wealth discovered. Greenland's path to economic independence seems to lie beneath the ice. Geological surveys revealed enormous mineral wealth, rare earth elements, uranium, iron ore, gold, diamonds, and potentially vast oil and gas reserves. Climate change, ice melting, new opportunities. Climate change, devastating globally, is creating opportunities in Greenland. As ice melts, previously inaccessible minerals become reachable. New shipping routes open. Resource extraction becomes feasible. Mining proposals. International companies circling. International mining companies, particularly from China, Australia, and Canada, have proposed massive projects. A single rare earth mine at Kvanefield could potentially replace Danish subsidies entirely. Environmental concerns, pristine landscapes, indigenous rights, pollution risks. But at what cost? Mining threatens pristine environments, traditional hunting grounds, and Greenland's tourism potential. Greenlanders are divided, economic independence versus environmental protection. The uranium debate. In 2013, Greenland's parliament narrowly voted to allow uranium mining, reversing a decades-old ban. In 2021, a new government reversed this again, banning uranium mining. The debate continues. Geopolitical competition, flags of USA, China, Russia, EU, and Greenland's resources have attracted geopolitical attention. China wants rare earths for technology manufacturing. The US wants to prevent Chinese control of strategic Arctic territory. Russia is expanding Arctic military presence. The EU needs resources and Arctic access. Trump's purchase offer. 2019 headlines. In 2019, President Trump's offer to purchase Greenland, dismissed by Denmark as absurd and by Greenland as insulting, revealed the intensity of great power interest. Modern Denmark and Greenland contemporary Denmark. Modern Denmark, sleek cities, wind turbines, cycling culture. Modern Denmark is one of the world's most successful nations. Population 5.8 million. Consistently ranked among the happiest countries. A social democratic welfare state balancing capitalism with comprehensive social programs. Danish achievements: design, renewable energy, pharmaceuticals. Denmark leads in wind energy, sustainable design, and quality of life. Danish companies like Novo Nordisk and Maersk are global giants. Copenhagen is a model of livable urbanism. Nordic cooperation. Denmark in international context. Denmark is deeply integrated into Europe and NATO while maintaining strong Nordic ties with Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Iceland. It's a small nation that punches above its weight through cooperation and specialization. The Commonwealth, Faroe Islands, Greenland. But Denmark still includes two autonomous territories, the Faroe Islands and Greenland, remnants of its colonial past. The relationship with Greenland remains Denmark's most complex political challenge. Contemporary Greenland. Modern Greenland, Nuuk's colorful houses, modern amenities, traditional practices. Greenland today is a study in contrasts. The capital Nuuk has 19,000 people, one-third of Greenland's population, with universities, shopping centers, and cultural institutions. Yet step outside, and you're immediately in vast wilderness. Social challenges, suicide rates, alcoholism, housing shortages. Greenland faces serious challenges. It has one of the world's highest suicide rates, particularly among young men. Alcoholism is widespread. Housing is desperately short. Economic opportunities beyond fishing and government jobs are limited. Cultural revival, language, arts, traditional knowledge. Yet there's also revival. Greenlandic language and culture are flourishing. Young Greenlanders are blending traditional knowledge with modern education. Greenlandic music, film, and literature are gaining international recognition. Political landscape, independence debate. The independence question dominates politics. The left-wing Inuit Ataqatigiit party advocates faster movement toward independence. The center-left Siumut party takes a more gradual approach. All parties support eventual independence. The question is when and how. Economic reality check, fishing industry, subsidy dependence. But achieving economic independence is daunting. Fishing provides only about 20% of GDP. Mining projects are uncertain and controversial. Tourism is growing but seasonal and limited. Without Danish subsidies, Greenland's standard of living would collapse. The climate dimension, melting ice, rising seas. And climate change looms over everything. Greenland's ice sheet is melting faster than predicted, contributing to global sea level rise. This brings economic opportunities but also global responsibilities. What happens in Greenland affects the entire planet. WHY Greenland Matters Now. The new Arctic Great Game, strategic map, Arctic region with military bases, shipping routes, resource deposits. Why is the world suddenly so interested in Greenland? The answer is simple. The Arctic is becoming the 21st century's most strategic region, and Greenland is the Arctic's keystone. Shipping routes, Northwest Passage, Arctic routes opening. Climate change is opening new shipping routes. The Northwest Passage through Arctic Canada and along Greenland's coast could cut shipping time between Europe and Asia by weeks. Control of these routes means economic and military advantage. Military strategy, Thule Air Base, submarine routes. The Arctic is also a military frontier. Russia is expanding Arctic military infrastructure. China has declared itself a near-Arctic nation despite being nowhere near the Arctic. Submarine routes pass through Greenlandic waters. Thule Air Base remains crucial to American missile defense. Rare earth elements, technology dependence. Greenland's rare earth deposits are strategically vital. Currently, China dominates global rare earth production, about 70%, creating dependencies for all modern technology from smartphones to electric vehicles to weapon systems. Greenland could break that monopoly. Climate change, Greenland ice sheet melting, global sea level impact. And Greenland's ice sheet is a global concern. It contains enough ice to raise sea levels by 7.4 meters, 24 feet, if it completely melted. As it melts faster, scientists need access to study it. Whoever controls Greenland influences global climate research. The future relationship. Denmark-Greenland tensions, competing visions. The Denmark-Greenland relationship is at a crossroads. Denmark sees Greenland as part of the kingdom, entitled to subsidies and protection. Many Greenlanders see Denmark as a former colonial master whose time has passed. Generational divide. Young Greenlanders want independence. Younger Greenlanders, born after Home Rule, feel no particular loyalty to Denmark. They're Greenlandic first, possibly Nordic second, and only technically Danish. They want independence sooner rather than later. Practical constraints, economic realities. But older Greenlanders remember poverty before Danish subsidies. They see the limited economy, the lack of private sector, the dependence on fishing. They worry independence would bring hardship. International suitors, China, USA, others offering deals. Meanwhile, other nations are offering alternatives. China has proposed massive infrastructure investments. The US has reopened a consulate in Nuuk and increased aid. Everyone wants influence. Denmark's dilemma: hold on or let go. Denmark faces its own dilemma. Continue subsidizing Greenland indefinitely while being criticized as neo-colonial, or support independence and lose Arctic territory, influence, and the ability to fulfill responsibilities to Greenlanders. Third way, enhanced partnership. Some propose a third way. Greenland becomes fully independent but maintains close partnership with Denmark for defense, foreign relations, and economic support, similar to the Compact of Free Association between the United States and Pacific Island nations. Closing. Legacy and future. Reflective montage. Ancient Inuit sites, Norse ruins, colonial buildings, modern Greenland, melting ice. The story of Greenland and Denmark is ultimately about adaptation and survival. The Inuit survived for millennia in the Arctic by adapting. The Norse colonists died out because they refused to adapt. Denmark colonized Greenland but is now adapting to a post-colonial reality. How history shaped today. Denmark's history shaped its modern character. A small nation that once had an empire, learned from losing it, and built a successful welfare state. The colonial legacy created obligations Denmark still fulfills through subsidies. Greenland's dual identity. Greenland's colonial history created a complex identity, indigenous yet influenced by Denmark, Arctic yet connected to Europe, traditional yet modern. This duality is both strength and challenge. The federal structure, Kingdom of Denmark explained. The Kingdom of Denmark today is unique. 3 countries, Denmark, Greenland, Faroe Islands, under one crown, each with different levels of autonomy. It's post-colonial pragmatism that keeps everyone together while acknowledging differences. Why Greenland commands attention. Greenland commands global attention because it sits at the intersection of multiple crises and opportunities. Climate change, ice melting, global impact. Climate change is most visible and rapid in the Arctic. Greenland's ice sheet is a global early warning system. Resource competition, mining, fishing, shipping, the scramble for Arctic resources, minerals, fish, shipping routes, makes Greenland strategically valuable. Geopolitical competition, great power rivalry, competition between the United States, China, Russia, and Europe for Arctic influence puts Greenland at the center of 21st century geopolitics. Indigenous rights, self-determination. Greenland's journey towards self-determination is watched by indigenous peoples worldwide as a test case for decolonization and sovereignty. The independence question. Will Greenland become independent? Probably, eventually. The question is when, under what terms, and what independence will mean in an interconnected world where small nations must align with larger powers. Greenland's landscape, ice, mountains, northern lights, small communities against vast wilderness. For now, Greenland remains the world's least densely populated territory, 56,000 people spread across 2.1 million square kilometers, most of it ice. A land where the midnight sun never sets in summer and darkness reigns in winter. Where traditional seal hunts happen alongside debates about Chinese mining investments. Where the ice that has covered the land for millions of years is melting before our eyes. NUUK, Greenland's capital, colorful houses against white landscape. The relationship between Denmark and Greenland, colonial master and colony, rich patron and dependent territory, Nordic partners with complicated history, will continue evolving. But one thing is certain, Greenland's importance will only grow. Greenland's coast, ice sheet, endless wilderness. As the Arctic warms and the ice melts, as shipping routes open and minerals become accessible, as great powers compete for influence and indigenous peoples assert sovereignty, Greenland will be at the center of it all. A tiny population controlling the world's largest island. An indigenous people navigating between traditional life and global modernity. A former colony deciding its future while the world watches. Iceberg in midnight sun, perfectly blue water, absolute stillness. This is why Greenland matters. This is why a place most people couldn't find on a map has become one of the 21st century's most important territories. From Viking colonies that vanished to indigenous survival that endured, from colonial exploitation to autonomous government, from isolated outpost to geopolitical prize, Greenland's story is still being written. And the next chapter will shape not just Greenland and Denmark, but the Arctic, and through the Arctic, the world. Greenland population, 56,000 area, 2,166,086 square kilometers, 836,330 square miles ice sheet coverage, 80% annual Danish subsidy, 3.4 billion DKK, $500 million USD, status. Autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Independence, legally possible, economically challenging. This end of story of how Greenland, a tiny population controlling the world's largest island. This is why a place most people couldn't find on a map has become one of the 21st century's most important territories. Subscribe to Timelines of Nations for weekly videos exploring the ancient to modern history of countries around the world.